Are there some common challenges that you see with business owners, teams that is repetitive across the board in communication and how they struggle in business?
Absolutely. Um, the first word that came to mind was power struggle, right? There's this like innate power struggle. And I think when business owners ultimately are leaders and they're creating leaders, right? So when you're a business owner and you have created an atmosphere where employees are there to thrive in the business and help the team thrive, you're basically teaching them how to be leaders too.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, well, welcome back to the Living in Denver podcast, where we talk all things Denver, from real estate, small business owners, community leaders, advocates. And today I'm excited to be joined by Hadassah Shoshanah. Now, in a world where communication is just getting fuzzier and less personal, she's here to help us get our point across, whether that's in our personal lives, in business relationships. And she is just more than a speech therapist, and this episode spans more than just for Denver residents. So welcome, Hadassah. I appreciate you being here. How you doing today?
I'm doing so well. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's just so great to be here with you and hear about what you do and the kind of covering that you have in this area. And it's just really inspiring to hear that you have such a great connection with the community. And I just really want to see if there's anything I can offer the community too.
I absolutely know that there is. I dug into you a little bit further, kind of seeing your background, where you came from, your different social medias, and what you have out there. And I love this space myself. Like, I love the psychology of communicating. In our world, real estate, where we're constantly trying to understand people's personal situations, what's going on around them, as we're talking to them, how to get them to where they want to be, because it's always not so clear. And I know you kind of have a colorful background and, how you ended up getting to Denver, but I'd like you to kind of tell our audience, what brought you here, how you got started in this field, and feel free to start wherever you want to start.
Wow, that's a long-winded question. So I'll start with maybe the beginning. So I am originally Canadian, and I moved to the United States to get my master's degree. So I did that in 2009, and then since 2009, I've just been traveling. It's been such an amazing experience. Like I have been able to go from place to place to place, and it's just been like an ushering into those places. So you just kind of know that you're on the vibe of where life wants to take you when some of those things happen. So I moved from New York to Florida to Texas to California to Chicago to Arizona and here to Denver. And I remember traveling and becoming a traveling therapist. I signed on with a company and I was like, I really want to stop in Colorado. And I never really got to. And then all these other things happened in my life. Like 7 years went by and I didn't even get to Colorado other than to just like drive through it, going from place to place. And then lo and behold, I get dropped right into Denver. And I'm like, wow, okay, this is where I'm going to be. I came here because there was a teacher here that I wanted to follow. And I was really wanting to deepen my inner spiritual awareness and connection to my inner being. And so I looked for that teacher. You're just some kind of it's a kind of like a deep searching for the right teacher. And I had all these catastrophic events happen in my life that led me to this point where I got a visual of this teacher on a video. And I was like, whoever this man is, I need to just listen to him in person. So I left where I was and came here and just like lined up all things, just kept coming in one after the other. But I've been a speech language pathologist, I would say, for my entire life. People ask me, like, when did you get started? How did you get started? And for me, it was like in third grade, fourth grade, and I was working with another student who was a second grader, and we were reading buddies, and I would teach him how to read. And from there, this sparked an interest in serving and volunteering. So I started doing that through the Learning Resource Room. And then I went to an alternative high school. So in that alternative high school, we were able to spend half days in a workplace and get credit for it. And so as soon as I could get into a cooperative education experience, I wanted to. But what's so funny is at that time, I wanted to be a pharmacist. So I went into the hospital and I was with the pharmacist for about 2 hours. And I was like, nope, this is not for me. I just knew it. And they put me in this closet with like the drug handbook. And I was like, no, this is not cool. Like I need more interaction. I need some more like hands-on learning. And so I went back to my preceptor and I was like, you got to send me somewhere else. And so she's like, what are you doing? You know, just kind of like, you kind of have that expression on the outside of you that's saying to you that you're not good, like what the hell's wrong with you kind of thing, right? Because you're a student and you're like all over the place, but that's how you figure stuff out, right? So I went and I asked for a new placement, and lo and behold, I get put and placed into a classroom with my fourth and fifth grade gifted teacher, who is now a speech and language teacher. And she had all students from kindergarten to grade 5 in her classroom, like autism, learning disability, mitochondrial deficiencies, perforated eardrums, blind, all kinds of children I got to work with. And because she knew me, she kind of gave me creative control. And then during that placement, I met an extraordinary woman who's a speech language pathologist, and she helped me map out my entire career. And
Wow.
what's so great is that I just kept going. I kept volunteering. I was volunteering in um, the aphasia community, where stroke patients or people who have been affected by stroke, families, you know, loved ones, they get together and kind of learn what functional communication is and supportive communication is. And so I was there, and through my career, I just kept going and going, and ended up back at square one. So I got into a college program and did the college program that fed into an American school, which was so exciting. And then I went to this American school. I came back, and when I came back, I was able to apprentice under the same speech language pathologist who helped me map out my career. So it was like one thing after the other, and just kind of those snippets of magic in between, or miracles in between those experiences that really helped me to know that this was what I was put here to do. And I didn't choose it, it chose me.
Amazing. That's a lot of, sounds like a lot of coincidences that kind of lined up together to put you here.
Yes. Yes, and
That's
what's so cool about that word coincidence is that in the Hebrew language, the word coincidence doesn't exist. It's literally mapped out for you. So I just was like, okay, this is like my life right now, you know? So
that's
yeah, when I
awesome.
just having those experiences is so encouraging, you know, especially interwoven with all of the challenges that come from things, because I didn't come from an easy life. Things were difficult when I was a child, and I didn't have good grades when I was in high school or undergraduate. And every single one of the chairs of the program when I was in undergraduate was like, you're never going to get in. You suck. Don't even try. You're going to fail. And I'm over here like, watch me, I'm gonna do this. And you know, one thing led to another, and it's just been such an extraordinary journey.
That's amazing. It's disheartening that at such a young age we can discourage somebody when knowing, I'm in my young 40s, and if I wanted to change paths tomorrow, I could and I should,
Yeah.
if that's what your life is pulling you towards. So well, we're glad you're here for sure. So give me the overview of what your kind of day to day looks like, right? What does your practice involve? I know you do more, you do both on the kind of traumatic side, with people with physical issues and challenges, as well as, more on the communication side too. So high level overview, what it is that you do, few specifics here, so the audience can kind of understand.
Sure. As a speech language pathologist, there's so many avenues. There's like so many roads that you can go down. And I really chose the medical route. So I did most of my work in skilled nursing facilities and subacute rehabs, where I met a lot of people who had strokes, falls, neurodegenerative diseases, um, tumors, brain tumors, all kinds of diagnoses that would lead them to having some sort of neurocognitive decline, traumatic brain injury, cerebral palsy, Lou Gehrig's disease, multiple sclerosis, Huntington's. And so there's a plethora of symptoms that arise when these impacts happen to the brain, and they cause issues with swallowing, communicating, understanding language, expressing language, um, functional chewing, even not just the swallow, but even just the chewing, voice, and anything that you can think of that's like head and neck. So hearing, auditory processing, things like that. So I really loved working with swallowing and swallowing disorders, and neurodegenerative diseases. But what was so interesting for me, and we can circle back to this, is my question in the years of me working, considering I was in the field since I was, in my teen years, and just kind of seeing the progression of how patients get services. My question was always, why are my patients not really getting better? And why is this just a maintenance kind of thing? So that was like one underlying question that I had that was like permeating through all of my journey as a speech language pathologist. And what's so great about being a speech language pathologist is that we get to connect with every single department that we're in. So I got to connect with nursing and doctors and pharmacists and CNAs and case managers, social work, mental health practitioners, psychiatrists. And so what that really instilled in me is this possibility, right? Like when we have a teamwork environment, we're working to help to rehab someone, there's this team approach. And so I just recently launched a private practice in that same air of team approach, connecting with other professionals and saying, look, we have this patient who has all these various things happening. How can we support them in reintegration into their environment so that they can do the things that they love, get back to work, get back to their relationships, get back to doing the things that they were doing, that they were doing before some of these issues arose. And then on the other side, I also coach communication. So I've always been great at giving advice, and it's like not something I kind of pride myself on, but it's always been offered to me this new way of analyzing communication. So discourse analysis helps us to see where a person is in any given point when they're sharing information. It's kind of like your emotions on your sleeve when you're speaking, and it's a very vulnerable task to speak, because you can hear where the heart is at and you can hear where the mind is at when someone is speaking. And so my aim in that branch is to support business owners, relationships, team leaders, to create synergistic environments that communication is easy and there's a flow in accessing a team-oriented environment instead of some of these hostile environments that we so often experience when we're working with and for other people.
Yeah, and I think and that's a great point. And I mean, if anybody were to think of corporate America, right, we all have something very similar that comes into our brains on, the old movie The Office, and
Right.
did you get the memo? And communication is tough across the entire corporate structure. And something that I think about a lot, where we're kind of going through this massive change of communication. I feel like that hasn't been around for, well, ever, right? And so in the last 20 years specifically, we can see it with our kids. um, Communication has changed. And as a society, I wanted to ask you, like, are we even communicating anymore, or are we so far disconnected and plugged into our phones, and how we receive information, like on a day-to-day basis? Do you see people communicating effectively at all?
Yes and no. I don't want to throw everything, into the trash. It's just like everyone is doing the best they can, right, with what they have. And we are generally wanting to self preserve because there's a desire to be important and valued and significant. And so when we're communicating, and we see this with children and we see this with couples that are having challenges with one another, or even, I was working with a woman who just had a stroke, and her son was having a conversation with me and being like, "Well, she's not really listening to me." And it's like, okay, let's set it up so that you guys are listening to each other and you can hear each other in between what's being said, instead of just having an expectation of just like me, 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 me. And I think that's where communication has kind of missed the mark, where it's very self-focused
Mm.
instead of the curiosity of being in an interaction with someone else to really know and feel and sense where that person is at, so that there's a real connection. And I think really what we're looking for is connection, and that's the greatest part about communication, whether it's body language or facial expression, or a point here or there, an eye gaze, whatever it is. We're always looking for some sort of meaningful connection. And if we are missing that connection and we experience kind of a dismissal from our partner, or even a dismissal from our children, we feel like we are not important, that we're not significant. And those feelings can really depress someone and really make them feel like, what's the point of living? No one really listens to me anyways. I'm
Mm.
not that important. So yeah, it's like I just feel like we're kind of missing each other these days, and I don't think that social media and technology has helped. But what we can do is use the technology and the social media better, so that we can really create that connection we're looking for, and find ways to hit the mark, which is communicating with purpose and communicating with meaning, so that we can really bridge the gap between kind of like going one way and going the other way, and like really meeting in the middle.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about the technology part. Like, is that helping or is it hindering? Because on one hand, we can communicate with anybody at virtually any time right now,
Yeah.
right? Whether that's a good or bad thing. I left the house yesterday without my phone, to go grab dinner. And it was, on one hand, I was a little bit worried and bothered, like, oh God, I'd never leave my phone at home. And on the other hand, I was like, no one can get in touch with me right now. Like,
I'm free.
I
All
like
right.
connected with myself from like the mid 90s of like
Yeah.
going out on my bike and just disappearing, like it was a little bit freeing on one hand. So you're in the
Yeah.
camp that technology necessarily is not helping us, even though we can communicate more.
Yes. um Technology has basically become skeleton communication, right? It's like we're like not able to fully express how we feel through a text message. Even if
Hmm.
we're handwriting something in cursive, you can sense where a person's emotions are when they're writing, because there's a behavior that's causing that writing on the page. But when you see
Sure.
a text on a screen, there's just a disengagement, a disconnection,
Yeah.
unless there's a a way of using language in a descriptive way to support that purpose of connection. So, I know I don't even know what they're called these days. I'm a millennial, so the ones that came after us, like two generations after us, I think Gen Zs,
Gen Z.
Gen
Oh,
Alpha.
no.
Yeah.
No, there's Gen Z is after millennial, but I don't know what the younger ones are.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
they're alphas or something. And
Oh, yeah.
so,
I think you might be right. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
So there's a lot of like emojis and like, short forms. And it's like, I don't really know what any of these like short forms mean. And it's really siphoning down the conversation to like rote task, instead of allowing that free flow of language to come through to create that connection. So it's kind of like you have a dictionary of words and like you're just poke 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 and you're
Hmm.
like, here's the message, like figure me out. And it's like,
Yeah.
how do you figure anybody out like that? You know?
It's interesting you bring that up. I've got I'm on Discord quite a bit, and there's a member of one of the groups that I'm in who's in his young 20s. You know, smart kid. And we were talking about this one day, and I use grammar, I use capitalization, I use sentence structure,
Yes.
and we were talking about texting because I was having an issue with our kid. And I asked him, I said, so like he said something and he's like, oh, I think that could come across as being a little aggressive. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, you capitalized the sentence and you used a period and then you used another sentence on top of that. So to my friends, that would come off as being aggressive. I was like, you gotta be kidding. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Right. And there's no one on the other side to tell me like, hey, you're being a jerk about this. It's just, I don't know what I don't know. And someone else on the other side is taking it as an aggressive act. Blew
Yes.
me away.
Capital, just
Yeah.
capital letters and periods, things that are normal to grammar, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it was kind of interesting. It made me sit back and think like, okay, I got to meet them on their turf. You know, we want to meet where they are so we can communicate better with them. So you start looking into the rules and like thumbs up emojis, no go. Like no day. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, but that's how they communicate. So how do we do it better? Um,
Yeah.
and trying to get better with us, are there any like hacks or anything? Hacks are everybody's rage, right? We used to just call them tips
Yep.
or tricks. Um,
Yep.
in helping someone communicate, you're getting stuck, you know, a conversation isn't going the right way. I've done lots of research in the past, NLP and body, you know, just how your physical affects your communication and how you think and feel. Are there any little hacks that you can give someone to really help when people are feeling stuck in trying to communicate, probably verbally more than just via text message, um, that just massively work?
Every every interaction requires some level of curiosity and validation. And when we have gotten into an interaction that is no longer positive, it has lost curiosity and validation. And those two areas of listening essentially have are so fundamental to interacting with someone, because when we're interacting with someone, it's not about what we know. It's about learning about that other person, or where they're at, or understanding where their being is, or where their mind is at, or what happened, or why they're depressed, or, we're talking to our kids. It's like we want to show up in a place of such immense curiosity and allow ourselves to be in a validating space. So, what does that look like, right? It looks like, I wonder why this person is talking to me this way. I wonder what happened that is making them lash out at me in this way. How can I put myself on the back seat instead of fighting and responding in a combative manner? How can I disengage that part of it and turn into, hey, I really notice that something's off here and I want to understand it, but I might not say the right things and I really just want to hear you, you know? And that is validation and curiosity at the same time, because you're just being present with what situations happening in the moment instead of trying to coerce the situation into something that we want to control it into.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is stepping back, asking questions, and potentially repeating what you heard them say, right?
Right. So that's part of active listening. It's part of the process of really tuning into the person in front of you. And at the same time, how annoying is it? Is like when you're feeling off and someone's just like bombarding you with questions like, what's going on? What's happening? Why do you feel that way? Like, what happened? Like, you know what I mean? It's like knowing when to offer that kind of interrogation versus, a real genuine concern. And that curiosity is embedded in this concern because we love this person, whether they're our brother or sister or stranger on the street. We still love them. Like,
Yeah.
we want to know what's going on. So it's this genuine desire to know, not just to placate.
And that can be tough depending on what frame of mind you have and what you want
Mhm.
the outcome to be, right? Like
Yes.
if you're trying to get something out of somebody, like you want them to perform better, you want them to agree with you, that's front of mind constantly in every
Right.
question you ask, every mannerism you respond to. And I think we shut down as people when we know, and you may not know what they're trying to get at, but you know they're trying to drive it in a direction that is not necessarily where you want it to go. You know, you just feel something's off. Something's, it's like getting,
Yeah.
questioned by a police officer. Like you don't know what they're getting at, but you know it's not good. And so,
Right. And you
you
feel that ick, right? Like, you
yeah,
just feel that ick and you just don't know how to put words to it sometimes. And it's like, well, what do I do now? Do I shut down? Do I walk away? Do I stay? I don't know what's happening.
yeah. Yeah. So what do you see on in some of the corporate world? And I know Denver has a lot of small businesses. We're very heavy on small businesses, entrepreneurship, like the next Silicon Valley type of place. And I know communication can often be a struggle with small businesses. I mean, I see it in my personal life when you have a small team of 2 to 4 people, it's more like family than it is business. And then when you grow, get to 10, 20 employees, everything starts to shift and change. But are there some common challenges that you see with business owners, teams, that is repetitive across the board in communication and how they struggle in business?
Absolutely. Um, the first word that came to mind was power struggle, right? There's this like innate power struggle. And I think when business owners ultimately are leaders, and they're creating leaders, right? So when you're a business owner and you have created an atmosphere where employees are there to thrive in the business and help the team thrive, you're basically teaching them how to be leaders too. And so the power struggle basically comes in this place of both parties are wanting this mutual respect. And in order to lead someone into mutual respect, we first have to provide that respect. And when we can't provide that respect in a way in which our employees truly see that we're on a team and we're on a collective goal oriented focus, then there can be a breakdown in that, because the power struggle is like, well, you don't care about me. You don't want to pay me well. You don't want to do this. You don't want to do I'm just a number to you. All these things. And so those kinds of feelings kind of underlie this power struggle. And as a business owner and as a leader, there is some sense of subordinate cause, right? It's like the person who is employed doesn't have all the same responsibilities as the business owner. And it's like, how do you mitigate knowing that this person works for you, but they're not a lackey or a slave, right? They're there to fill in the gap of a puzzle that helps to make the entire picture be more clear. So I think really getting into why that power struggle is happening, and getting to the bottom of what gets triggered in the leader when an employee is going to say something that's obviously not leadership bound at times, right? Not to say that they're doing that all the time. It's that sometimes in that power struggle, there's going to be words that come out that are not true leadership. So we want to step back again and just be curious, like, you know I don't have a power struggle. I know my role. It's my business. you're working with the business, you're part of my business, you are contributing to my business, and right now the contributions are not equal. So we need to figure out how we can create contributions that are equal so that we don't have this sense of toxic hostility between us, so that we can get to this collective purpose so that you can get paid and I can get paid too.
Yeah. Yeah, I see the struggle all the time, and I think we have a different, maybe understanding of different phases where a business is growing. You might have to be different, I would assume, in different phases, but all we see are the Elon Musks of the world, the Bill Gates, the Steve Jobs, and we all know that they're likely assholes to work for. Like,
Mm,
we have never heard this common theme that, like, these high level CEOs are like, oh, they're super nice people to work for, right? I've never heard that from anybody. So we see that. And then I think there's that misconception that, you have to be a jerk to get people to do what you want. And then there's like the Gary Vaynerchuk approach, who's like, if you think these people work for you, you're wrong. You work for them,
yeah,
and they will work infinitely harder for you when they know you've got their back ultimately. And
exactly.
I could see there being some interesting challenges, not to mention with, and I've seen it in my own life, the younger generation, right? I'm going to use those words and I'm going to get hate mail because of it. Have a different upbringing that makes them think that stuff like quiet quitting or that you're worth more than you are is a reality. And we've pushed college so heavily where now, like in Denver, the trades are getting paid double what most college graduates are getting paid, because the shift is so extreme in our tech city, that contractors are in control right now more than most tech companies out there. Plumbers, HVAC guys getting paid 200 plus bucks an hour, and they can because no one else is willing to do the work. And I know in a lot of the office scenarios we're struggling job wise because there's so many people willing to fill these tech jobs, but kids getting out of college think that they're instantly worth 125,000 a year. So how do you balance that, like, expectation of what I'm worth as an employee? My worth as an employee is worth more than this company is willing to pay, and if they're not going to pay it, I'm just going to jump to the next one. Like, how do you set those boundaries as a business owner hiring young people?
Great question. The first thing that I thought of was, yes, they are worth that. Just like you are worth that, and you are probably worth more. And so what we want to do is create a environment in which they feel like they can grow and they can exercise their skills in a way that makes them feel valued and valuable to the team, and create a kind of accountability, responsibility, quarterly um, interaction with that employee that says, look, I know that this is your goal. I know that you are worth this. Unfortunately, the reality is we just don't have the revenue to do that right now. That doesn't take away from your worth. However, you are part of this team, and we love that you're a part of this team. And we want to create a growth chart or a growth process or a growth plan that we can put into motion so that you can feel like you are going to continue to reach those steps and getting to your ultimate goal of this, say, dollar amount. But also on the other side is, are we really seeking a dollar amount, or are we really seeking something that's valuable in our life and something that we really care about?
Mm,
I think with the younger generation, they just don't want to do wishy-washy work anymore. They want to do work that's meaningful. They want to do work that they care about. And so how do we impact the younger generation in caring? And we have to care in order for them to feel like they're cared about, right? And it just comes
yeah.
back to what you shared earlier, which is like, have your back, have their back, and have a real honest conversation about growth potential. Because the worst is when you're working for somebody and they're like, yeah, we see growth potential in you, and then they just kind of keep you at the same place, and there's no elevation, or there's no improvement in responsibility, or just continuing to put more tasks and no compensation. And so we really have to look at it from a state of true respect, because every single person is worth what they think they're worth.
Yeah.
And we all had to climb the ladder. And if a young person is like, well, this is what I'm worth right off the bat, then maybe that person likely isn't right for the company, right? But if they're willing to have an honest conversation with you and really go through this process of like, hey, this is what I see, this is what I see in you, this is the leadership potential I see in you, this is how I can support you in building yourself to that place, let's do it, you decide.
Yeah, I think those are some incredible points for those of you listening is most people don't quit because of the money. They mostly quit because of how they're treated and how they're advancing in their position. You know, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? If you're a piece of fruit, if you're not ripening, you're rotting. And I think we all go through similar things in our life, and having a bigger purpose, you know, maybe on the backside of their pay. Uh, I think it goes a lot further than we give it credit for. It's not just a job description that you're showing up for 9 to 5. Like I think we're breaking that cycle a little bit of like you show up from 9 to 5 and you work here for 40 hours and you get a retirement package and you're done. No, we know that stuff's not real. So we've gotten rid of all the advanced benefits of pensions and stuff like that. So now what is there? There's purpose. There's purpose in the work that we do. And if we don't have it, I'm just not seeing much of a follow through in the younger people to continue doing it. And that's why they will job hunt, you know, and hop from one position to another until they find their purpose. I think you would make a great, what Gary Vaynerchuk calls a chief heart officer, Hadassah. Your ability to understand, you know, communication, like he hammers on it. He's got a good sized company, and that's his most important position is his chief heart officer, which is just a person that's there to understand what everybody wants and needs, and to just try to help them fulfill that. And so what I did is I reached out to my audience. I've got a good handful of people that will help give feedback on guests that I have coming up. And I said, hey, we have a communication expert coming on the show. Give me your scenarios. Let me know what you're struggling with. And I had a few people give some good questions of things that they're going through. So if you're willing, I'd love to ask you these questions and see if you've got any 2 cents on how to help these people.
Awesome.
So Sarah asked, within my sales team, I feel like I'm pulling more weight than everyone else combined in turn, which helps the entire team. Everyone gets paid more due to her efforts, and she struggles with knowing how to communicate that to her boss to either A, get more money, right? More compensation because she feels like she's doing more work, or B, try to get everyone else to pull their own weight. It's an interesting dynamic. And in the sales organization, I've been in, you know, similar situations myself. How do you kind of break through that cycle, or how do you approach your boss about that?
Yeah, in this case, this is a great question. I think a lot of people face this. It's like more responsibility. One thing that she should know is that you get more responsibility when you're good. That means you're really good. And when you know you're really good, then you can leverage that in a conversation with your boss. And you can say, you can approach your boss. I love priming, right? Priming is so important when you're going to have a difficult conversation and you know that there's going to be, you know, you're going to get to the edge of someone's awareness. Priming is a good way to start. Like, hey, I really want to talk about growth opportunities that are available to me in this position. Do you have some time today or on this day to have a conversation about that? And then in that conversation, you can say something like, well, I noticed that these are my responsibilities and I really love what I do. And at some points in time, I'm feeling a little burnt out because I feel like the weight isn't distributed carefully amongst all of us. And while I love contributing to the team, I want to make sure that I can be at my best. And in order for me to be at my best, I don't want to feel burnt out. How do you see us working through this challenge so that we can support each other in growing so that we all get compensated well?
Hmm. Interesting. You hit on a lot of points that are to the boss's benefit, right? In how you can then grow out of that situation. That's great. That is worth paying for right there. If I knew someone like you existed during my career, yeah, we would have been talking because that's like, I couldn't imagine. I couldn't bring that up or calculate that out with years of thinking about it. That was awesome. So, all right, Esther here, she's the team lead and she struggles to strike the balance between maintaining professionalism and being approachable to her team. I'm a friendly person by nature and I want everyone to like me, but that often doesn't work in my favor.
Right. So here I would say that there's a desire to get significance and validation from our employees, and we don't want to do that with our employees. We want to be the validator and the creator of significance in our employees, and when we do that, then they like us. So when we can validate them and say, hey, you're doing a really good job. Hey, I noticed that this new thing that we talked about, you implemented it right away. And I'm really seeing the benefit of that. I really see the results from that. And I just really thank you for really, go getting it. Things like that are a more efficient way to create likable relationships in work environments. We don't want to get any kind of our validation or feelings of self-worth from our relationships from our employees. One great factor is when our employees achieve goals, we know that we're doing the right thing, right? And
Mm.
that in itself creates that self validation. And in that validation, we're no longer looking for our employees to like us. We're looking for employees to be a part of the team. And sometimes we're going to say things that are not liked. We're going to say things that are not exciting. However, because we have created such an environment and an ambiance of building each other up no matter how hard it gets, then you can get to that place of, okay, obviously I'm respected, obviously I'm liked, I'm retaining my employees, productivity and efficiency is through the roof. We're kind of rolling like a well-oiled machine. And that's how you know you're well liked. Does that
Mm.
answer your question?
A
I hope that
hundred percent. It answers it for me at least. Hopefully
yeah.
it answers it for her. Yeah, that's again, amazing. Like you've done this before. Okay, Troy, his company has moved more remotely, like a lot of companies have in the last few years. I'm finding it challenging to maintain consistent and effective communication via Zoom, email, or text. What can I do to help get that team feeling back?
This is hard because proximity is important. And so my question would be is are there any opportunities for people to connect outside of just that Zoom? Like is
Mm.
there any opportunity to have interactions with each other that are not really work oriented? So maybe one of the Zooms is like you're kind of just messing around, like, you know, asking questions with each other and really learning about who each other are, instead of always just being work oriented. And I think that might offer some kind of openness in that team orientation being so far apart. I think validation again is another great one. So it's like you notice someone doing something really good, you validate that. You notice your boss doing something really good, you validate that. Your boss noticed something in someone else, they validate that. So just a session where you would validate each other or just notice goodness in each other, or ask, three, what is it, three truths and a lie, or two truths and a lie. Like those kinds of interactions with each other, even though they're kind of lame at times, the icebreakers, they really do break the ice. They
Yeah.
really do help us get to laughing and connecting. And I think once you can break the ice with laughter, you really can improve any team dynamic, no matter how far in distance anybody is.
100%. Yeah, as you're saying that, I'm thinking we have a weekly team meeting, and I am not the boss of my brokerage firm. And yeah, he's on time generally, and the rest of us are 5 to 10 minutes earlier. But you're right. Before he gets on, we're just talking, shooting the shit. And a couple of these guys I've never actually met in person before, because we're all just individual agents. But yeah, that talking, just shooting the shit between each other yeah, gold. And then when he gets on, now we're all on the same page, and now the dynamics shift a little bit. But yeah, I'm sure that is more growth, has more growth out of it than the actual weekly meetings do. Huh. All right. Now the last one, more relationship focused and probably more important than anything else, from Mike. And I know as a male, I can understand this. I don't know how to tell my wife. I just don't have much to say. She gets mad at me for not having responses to everything she's talking about. And much of it just seems like thoughts that she's having. I'm just letting her vent. But most of the time, I don't really have an opinion one way or another about what she's saying. How can I try to get on the same page with her without hurting her feelings?
So this is you can probably empathize with this. I can empathize with this too, right?
Yeah.
So um, you know, the question really boils down to, do you really care about connecting? Do you really care about that conversation? Do you really care? That's a question to really dig deep about, to think about this desire for listening, right? So we kind of put that process of active listening in place, which is like the first step of that process is, do I have the bandwidth to listen? And am I willing to listen? Am I willing to be present with this conversation? So I would say, if there's no bandwidth and you don't really care about what she's saying, but you want to give her that moment to vent, then say that. Say,
Hmm.
Mama, I love you so much, and I want you to feel like you are heard, and I want you to be able to feel like you can tell me anything. But in my mind, I'm in a place where I want to fix things and I want to solve problems, because that's what men do. Men's minds are always solving problems. That's just what they do. And
Yeah.
women have this innate ability to talk about anything whenever they want for like 7 hours at a time. So it's like, it's just like, so really he's looking, what I hear him say is, how do I create a boundary that allows her to feel heard, and me also feel like I'm not being a douchebag and like
Yeah.
not listening to her, right? So you got to create a boundary and say, okay, love, I need a primer. Before you go on in a story, I need you to make sure that I'm really present so I can fully hear you. And if I'm not present and I can't hear you, I'm not going to be a good listener. So can you do that for me and really give me that primer and say, hey, babe, I really need to say something to you and I really want to share something with you. Is this a good time to share it with you? And babe, if you want to go into an event and you just want to share a story about something, I definitely want to listen, but tell me what you want from me when I'm listening. Do you want me to just say aha? Do you want me to offer an opinion? Do you want me to offer a solution? And if it's none of those, then it might be better to talk to your girlfriends or your mom or someone else that is willing to be in that space with you where you can just feel heard in that way. Because in my mind, I'm going to go to a place of solving the problem. And if I can't solve a problem, I'm probably going to check out. And that's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm in it all the time. I actually have a friend who's a principal. And he said, working with females all the time, he said, one of the best questions I ever heard was, do you want me to just listen, or would you like me to offer an opinion or
Yes.
a suggestion to fix the scenario? Um,
Yes.
so I could talk to you all day, Hadassah, about this stuff. It's just absolutely fascinating to me. But in an effort to to help everybody, if someone wanted to reach out to you, what's your kind of preferred method of communication? Yeah, how do you want to be reached? Yeah, tell our audience the best way to get in touch with you if they have any questions.
Sure. Thank you so much. It's just been awesome. I feel like I could talk to you forever too. People can connect with me at Hadassah at morethanaspeechtherapist.com. That's my email address, or on Instagram through my handle, hadassahRose.slp. And my website is just being revamped and recreated. So I'm in that place of growth. So patience for myself, I'll say is one thing, but definitely those two ways, through my email address Hadassah at morethanaspeechtherapist.com, and through my Instagram at hadassah.rose.slp.
Awesome. Well, great. And ladies and gentlemen, we will have all of Hadassah's contact information in the description below. And until the next time, happy housing.